not one of exploitation and depletion, but one of restoration and renewal. We need a steadfast commitment to collaboration if we are to forge justice, equity, and sustainability for all. I understand the concerns about the costs of climate change and climate action, the fear that it will disrupt economies and livelihoods. But the reality is that the cost of inaction is far greater. The devastating impacts of climate change are already being felt throughout countries everywhere. Small island developing states, like the Bahamas, face the brunt of this crisis despite contributing the least to its cause. We as leaders must acknowledge that this is not a burden to be shared, but an opportunity to be seized, to build more resilient infrastructure, to create a cleaner and more efficient energy systems, and to foster innovation that drives economic growth. In the Bahamas, we are not sitting back and waiting. We are charting our own course, leading from the front lines of climate change with a blueprint for a more sustainable future. In the Bahamas, we've embarked on a new energy era, which focuses on energy efficiency upgrades, utility-scale solar power in our nation's capital, new hybrid grids in our family of islands and rural communities, and deployment of modern technology. This transition is not simply about reducing our carbon footprint. It is about creating greater job security through green jobs, enhancing skills for Bahamian workers, developing cleaner energy, reliable and resilient electricity supply, and lowering energy bills. The implementation of our new energy era is being facilitated via blended finance, public-private partnerships, changes to legislative and regulatory regimes, and increased accountability and oversight. However, we still must compete with international order that doesn't view economies of scale of small island states as worth the cost. Our small country must compete in procurement for solar panels, batteries, and other key materials and resources against cities and countries whose economies are much larger than ours. Despite all this, we Bahamians remain innovators. Our country is advancing efforts to pilot ocean thermal energy conservation, OTEC, across 9 islands in the Bahamas to support the provision of clean and affordable energy, drinking water, and cooling, a triple win for our people and humanity. We recognize the immense potential of our oceans, not just as a source of livelihood, but as a source of innovative climate solutions. Increasing temperatures are resulting in drought conditions across several islands and increasing sea levels and floods from monster storms and have contaminated our freshwater lenses. However, despite being celebrated for blending finances, dedicating human resources, and forging partnerships to advance the pilot, the Bahamas has been frozen out from much-needed technology transfer due to not being eligible for overseas development assistance. The Paris Agreement calls for enhanced technology transfer and to advance investments in innovation. OTEC has mitigation, adaptation, and sustainable development co-benefits. But why are barriers still put in place to hinder its realization in the Bahamas and elsewhere? And yet we continue to persevere. We are fiercely protecting our natural resources, recognizing the intrinsic value in mitigating climate change. The Bahamas has been documented as having one of the largest seagrass meadows on Earth, with significant greenhouse gas sequestering capabilities. We continue to advance a blue carbon methodology to protect and enhance these precious resources for humanity and our people. The potential of our seagrass meadows is to generate carbon credits, represents a new frontier in our fight against climate change, and source of revenue to support our sustainable development goals. In 2023, the volume of credits traded on the voluntary carbon market was less than half that in 2022, and the market's value shrank from $1.9 billion to $723 million. While the global carbon market is currently experiencing a period of adjustment with a decline in trading volume and value, this presents a strategic opportunity for the Bahamas with its seagrass meadows. Our focus remains on meeting the highest standards of verification and integrity with this space. positioning ourselves as a leader in this emerging market. As governments around the world, including the United States, implement stricter emissions regulations, and companies face increasing pressures from their shareholders to meet their climate targets, the demand for high-quality carbon credits will undoubtedly grow. We are committed to seizing this opportunity, ensuring that our natural resources are not just protected, but also leveraged to drive sustainable economic growth and contribute to a global solution. We are also developing a coral gene bank to protect vital biodiversity and ecosystems that are important for protecting our planet and improving coastal resilience. You can see that we are moving ahead with specific actions to mitigate the crisis we have not caused. But our efforts are not limited to our own shores. The Bahamas is committed to being a leader in climate action, working with international partners to advance innovative financing mechanisms, facilitate technology transfer, and advocate for the needs of vulnerable nations on the international stage. And we want to do more, but we need good faith partnerships. Despite our negligible carbon footprint, the Bahamas has committed to the implementation of 41 mitigation actions and even more adaptation actions in our nationally determined contributions. These are areas for partnerships and investments. We remain committed to multilateralism and global partnerships. We recently convened nations of the Western Hemisphere to the Organization of the American States, resulting in the Declaration of the Bahamas on Climate Finance in the Americas and the Declaration of Nassau for Sustainable Development in the Americas. These are not just symbolic gestures. These are tangible steps demonstrating that even the smallest nations can drive meaningful change. Let us be clear-eyed about the path ahead. Investing in climate resilience, particularly in nations like mine, which are most vulnerable to the crisis, is not just about altruism. It's about enlightened self-interest. It is a strategic imperative for every nation on this planet. As climate impacts intensify, the cost of inaction will escalate dramatically, leading to increased displacement, resource scarcity, and instability. The influx of climate refugees will not be confined to coastal nations. It will be a global crisis impacting economies, straining resources, and testing social cohesion in every corner of the world. Funding climate adaptation requires a clear understanding of this, our interconnected destiny. By investing in climate adaptation and mitigation measures today, we can avert these crises and create a more secure and prosperous society for all. It demands a coordinated approach where public development finance from governments and multilateral institutions align with private sector investments to unlock trillions needed to drive real change. And for nations like the Bahamas, burdened by a crushing debt largely attributable to climate-related disasters, debt relief and restructuring are not just acts of solidarity, they are pragmatic necessities, enabling us to invest in resilience for our people and contribute meaningfully to climate solutions. Let us remember that the storms, not political choices, are driving this fiscal reality, and it is in all of our interests to address it head-on. Corporations that take this threat seriously and pursue real mitigation strategies and investments must be rewarded. It's time to recognize climate leadership as a mark of true corporate success. We should reward those who are not just talking about sustainability, but actively integrating it into the core of their business models. We must acknowledge that public capital alone cannot finance and transition to climate resilience. De-risking low carbon is essential to unlock the trillions in private capital needed to scale up innovation and make projects that are currently considered unbankable more attractive to investors. The solutions we in the Bahamas are pioneering, the partnerships we are forging, hold lessons for every nation, every industry represented here at the summit. Because the truth is, climate change is not a distant threat. It is a present reality with the power to impact every aspect of our interconnected world. Look at the agenda before you. Can we honestly discuss empowering global trade without addressing the vulnerability of supply chains to climate-related disruptions? We must ensure that trade, a powerful engine for development, is also a force for sustainability, promoting climate-resilient infrastructure and supporting nations most vulnerable to climate impacts. Can we truly strive for livable cities without acknowledging the disproportionate burden of rising sea levels, extreme heat, and climate migration on urban populations, particularly in coastal areas? We need cities designed with resilience in mind, powered by renewable energy and equipped to withstand the shocks of a changing climate. Can we credibly talk about strengthening global health systems while ignoring the escalating health impacts of climate change? From respiratory illnesses exacerbated by air pollution to waterborne diseases spread by flooding, climate change is a growing threat to global health, demanding innovative solutions and increased investment in climate-resilient healthcare infrastructure. And can we authentically champion technological transformation for sustainable growth without making climate action a core tenet of that transformation? We need technology that not only drives economic development, but also reduces emissions, enhances resilience, and empowers communities affected by climate change. I believe that within the challenges we face lies the potential for transformative change. This summit, with its diverse expertise and global reach, has a unique role to play in turning this potential into a reality. Therefore, I challenge you, the leaders gathered here today, to embrace climate action not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity. To the captains of industry, let us move beyond pledges and invest in real, tangible solutions. Direct your capital towards renewable energy, sustainable infrastructure, and climate-resilient technologies. Support the innovators in climate-vulnerable countries. Partner with us to scale up the solutions that are already working. To policymakers, let us enact bold, transformative policies that accelerate the transition to a low-carbon, climate-resilient future. End fossil fuel subsidies, implement carbon pricing mechanisms, invest in nature-based solutions, and ensure that climate action is integrated into every aspect of policymaking. To the innovators, the disruptors, the change makers, let us place climate action at the heart of our technological advancements. Develop affordable, scalable solutions that can be deployed in our vulnerable communities. Foster knowledge sharing and capacity building. The world is watching, and the time for action is now. Let us seize this opportunity, not with apprehension, but with a renewed sense of purpose, a shared commitment to collaboration, and unflappable determination to construct a brighter, more sustainable future for all. Let the legacy of this summit be not one of words, but of deeds, not of pledges, but of partnerships, not of business as usual, but of the bold, transformative action that this moment demands. The Bahamas is ready. We are leading the way. Let us together chart a new course for humanity, one that ensures a healthy planet and an existence where we can all thrive. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Andrew Desiderio from Punchbowl News, the Honorable Chrissy Houlihan from the state of Pennsylvania, and the Honorable Mike Waltz from Florida.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Andrew Desiderio. I'm senior congressional reporter at Punchbowl News. We are thrilled to be back here once again as a media sponsor at the annual Concordia Summit. If you are new to Punchbowl News, we are a 3.5-year-old media startup based in Washington, D.C., where we cover power, people, and politics in our nation's capital. I'm thrilled to be here with such a great panel. I've got to my immediate right here Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan, Democrat from my native Pennsylvania. She's an Air Force veteran, and she serves on the House Armed Services and Intelligence Committees. And to her right, I have Congressman Michael Waltz, a Republican from Florida. He is the first Green Beret ever elected to Congress, and he serves on the Armed Services, Intelligence, and Foreign Affairs Committees. Quite the roster there for both of you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm thrilled to be here. Again, Punchbowl News is thrilled to be a sponsor once again at this year's summit. We're here today at the start of the UN General Assembly at what is obviously a very fraught time in the world. We have conflicts raging in Ukraine, in Gaza, of course, as well. And also top of mind, of course, is the pacing threat of China. And I want to get into all of that with my panel here. In addition to the fact that in 10 weeks or so, we have a little thing called a presidential election coming up, which is providing for quite a bit of uncertainty about what U.S. foreign policy will look like for the next 4 years. And of course, Congress has a very important role to play in all of this, regardless of who wins the presidential race. Congressman Waltz, I want to start with you. Right now, there's this debate over whether to lift existing restrictions on Ukraine's ability to strike inside Russian territory. Bipartisan majorities in Congress have written letters to the Biden administration saying that they need to lift the rest of these restrictions. The Ukrainians are here in New York, and then they're going to be in Washington later this week making the same case. On the other hand, former President Trump has been saying that he's going to end the war on day one. He has said that he wants to negotiate a peace settlement of some sort. Are those two goals in conflict with each other?
Well, first, good to be on with you and good to be on with my friend and colleague, Chrissy Houlihan. We both came into Congress together, and we're both, as fellow veterans, members of a bipartisan, veteran-centered caucus called For Country. Despite all of the discord and rancor that you see on national cable news, we literally spend hours upon hours together in a skiff, on trips abroad, including to Ukraine just before the war, and on the Armed Services Committee, where every year for the last 62 years we've passed a $800 and $900 billion defense authorization bill. We do get things done. They don't always make the news. To answer your question directly, as I know we're short on time, look, I have been incredibly frustrated with what I call President Biden, and Harris certainly endorsed, kind of too little, too late, trickle it in strategy. We seem to get to the answer about a year after the original request, and even when they get the weapon systems, their handcuffs placed on them. Christy and I were in Ukraine just before the war, and even then, when we were talking about how do we stop it, how do we deter it, how do we prevent this from happening, the answer from Washington to our embassy, from the administration, is, well, we don't want to arm Ukraine too heavily. It'll be too provocative. It'll be too escalatory. It'll give Putin the excuse that he's looking for, when in fact I think that approach is actually what was provocative. And it is notable that Russia has invaded a neighbor under President Bush, under President Obama, and now under President Biden, and did not under the Trump administration, who did arm the Ukrainians first with the javelins. In terms of how do we drive this to some type of conclusion, I think first you're going to see a real enforcement of the sanctions, those mother of all sanctions that were promised. President Trump has been very clear that he thinks our greatest asset is the oil and gas that the United States is sitting on, lifting the LNG ban, pushing that clean American gas out into the world, driving down the global commodities market. And analysts have told me repeatedly, at least, that around $50 a barrel, both Russia and Iran, for that matter, their war machines dry up and they're on their back foot economically. So I think enforcing the sanctions, really having a tough discussion about European burden sharing, and driving both sides to a negotiation, I think we have to ask ourselves, and my constituents ask me all the time, what does success look like? Is it in America's critical national interest to drive every Russian off every inch of Ukrainian soil, including Crimea? How long will that take? To what end? What will that cost? And I don't think that's been well defined.
Congresswoman, how would you define it?
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there, and thank you again for having us. And we do agree more than we disagree on many of those things, but if it's okay, I'd like to back up a little bit on some of the conversation that Mike just unfolded. One is, I agree. I believe that the administration has been too slow in rolling out a lot of the aid and support, military specifically, for Ukraine. Full disclosure, my father was born in Lviv. That was Poland at the time. This is something that's kind of personal to me in terms of my understanding of global politics and the world order. So I would agree with you on that. That being said, I am very concerned about future Trump administration because I'm not certain that there is a commitment to continuing to support Ukraine in their fight for their democracy and as a consequence for the fight for all of the democracies up and down kind of the Eastern European area, for NATO and what it means to the allyships that we have there, for the extended NATO, the extended allies that we have across the Indo-Pacific. I feel as though, although I would have liked to have seen the Biden administration be more aggressive with their support, and I would like to see them lift all of the different restrictions that they have, I really do think that the Biden administration and the future Harris administration understands the threat that it means to not be supportive of Ukraine. And I think that that's something that's a distinction between us.
Congresswoman, I want to stay with you on another important topic as it relates to the war in Ukraine, which is NATO burden sharing, encouraging the Europeans to contribute more to their own defense, to the collective defense of the alliance as well. Something I've heard from a lot of Democrats lately is that Donald Trump actually doesn't get enough credit for having pounded the table during his administration in pushing these European nations, particularly in Western Europe, to contribute more to their defense, to meet and exceed that 2% of GDP threshold. Do you see it that way? Does Trump deserve some credit for strengthening the NATO alliance in that respect? Because now you've got 2/3 of all NATO members meeting.
Sure, yeah, and let's back up a little bit. Nothing's more sobering than a war on your own continent to make you put up and play into the game and pay for the game. But you're not wrong. I do think there are several things that I think President Trump has good instincts on. One is the pacing threat of China. One is the importance of making sure that NATO participates, and they have. One thing that we don't have a lot of ability, speaking about the press, to try to articulate is, you're right, 2/3 of NATO countries are now participating at greater than 2%, and many of them have participated in terms of support for Ukraine at a much higher level as a percent of GDP or as a percent of dollars spent than we have. So, kind of this narrative that somehow we're still sharing the burden, I don't believe is true. And so I don't think that I necessarily attribute that to President Trump pounding the table as much as I attribute it to the fact that Ukraine was invaded. A sovereign nation was invaded on the continent of Europe.
Congressman Waltz, we have limited time here, so I want to pivot to China, which Congresswoman Houlihan just mentioned.
Should I just make one?
Yes, yeah, of course.
2% was the minimum that everybody pledged to a decade ago. You don't take the F student and pat him on the head for getting a D. Right? I mean, we should be celebrating those like Poland that are 4%, the Baltics that are truly investing. But the large economies, frankly, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, that should have been there a long time ago, getting to those points after whole cities have been devastated, after millions have died, isn't sufficient. And I don't think anyone should be taking a victory lap. If you look in contrast to Japan, who sees the threat coming, this is my pivot over to Asia, and understands what's going on in the Second Thomas Shoal and the South China Sea and what have you, and is making those investments as a deterrent measure, not a reactive measure. Japan should be celebrated for doing that, Poland and others as well, but we still have a long way to go, and I have real questions about how those contributions are being valued as well. There was recently a tranche of German tanks that were so bad, the Ukrainians, as desperate as they are, gave them back and said, this is going to cost us more to fix than to accept. How are those then valued? Were they valued as new, or the kind of the lemons that they were? So I think there's a lot to unpack there.
So within the last hour or so, we got some news from the Biden administration. They announced plans to ban Chinese software from U.S. cars, citing national security concerns. This sort of goes at the technology competition with China and efforts by Congress and the administration alike to try to enable that competition while also trying to deter a wider conflict with China. Congresswoman Houlihan, how do you view those two goals, and do you think that is it possible that they could be in conflict with each other?
So I'm intrigued by the banning of Chinese software. It just, in some ways, makes sense for lots of different reasons. We were talking behind the stage about kind of the implications for national security of if we're driving around in cars where we can be tracked, monitored, our cars can be stopped. You know, those kinds of things are really frightening when you think about the possibilities and the implications. I think this is another place where there's a lot of common ground, a lot of place where we agree that this is something that's worrisome and that the Chinese are not necessarily our friends. But I also would flip it back on all of us, which is there are many American companies as well that are sharing information with China, sharing software with China too, that is making us vulnerable, because all of this is a data play. Fundamentally, everything that we're talking about is the volumes and volumes of data that we're providing, either us to them to us, or open source. And we have a lot of thinking to do. And I'll end by saying, in Congress, there are fewer than 24 out of 435 members of Congress with STEM backgrounds, and I'm one of them. But we need more people in the body who think about these things with a technical brain and a technical mindset. And so I would encourage any of you all who are sitting there, out there in the audience, and who have a STEM background, to think about running for office in this way.
Congressman Waltz, I want to get your perspective as well, but also note for the audience that these two members of Congress sit on the House Intelligence Committee together, so they get the highest level classified briefings on all of this, and they generally get sort of a very thorough education on how this is all impacting our competition with China, as well as efforts by the administration to, again, prevent a wider conflict. But Congressman Waltz, I want to get your perspective too.
Well, I agree with Chrissy. This, data is the the oil of the industrial age, and this is a massive competition for data, the ability to use it, and our collective AI race. And I would just say the long pole in the tent, as we say in the Army, on AI isn't necessarily the talent or the algorithms or even the data and fully curated data. It's energy. And we will not win the AI race on wind and solar. You just can't do it. So I go back to kind of full circle on, we are blessed with clean, affordable gas sitting right underneath our feet. And one of my frustration, whether it's how we've dealt with Iran, how we dealt with Russian economy, how we've dealt with inflation here at home, or our investments into being able to power the AI race, is what I think has been a really, frankly, not great energy policy on behalf of this administration. On China, everything that we're doing, if you have TikTok on your phone, if you're driving a car, software on our cranes is a massive data collection mechanism. And she is openly talking about winning the competition with not just the United States, but with the West, by outdoing us from a technological standpoint.
With the limited time we have remaining, I want to pivot a little bit to the presidential race, the contrasting visions, if you will, on foreign policy. Congresswoman Houlihan, there's been a lot talked about in terms of how Vice President Harris would be different from President Biden on foreign policy. Obviously, I think it's fair to say they have the same general worldview, but each person is different, though they would carry out the foreign policy of the United States in a different and distinct way. One of those ways could be, for example, when it comes to the war in Gaza and trying to push for a ceasefire, a hostage release deal as well. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because it is something that has divided some members of your party, and Vice President Harris has taken, in some ways, a different tone than President Biden has when it comes to addressing the conflict in Gaza.
Yeah, that I think is a fair and a good question. I think I mentioned that my father was born in Poland. He was born to a Jewish family, and he survived the Holocaust. And so, again, this is one of my motivating factors for being here in Congress. And I think that the war in Israel, the war in Gaza, fundamentally is a war about returning to peace and returning the hostages and making sure that they're, in my opinion, and I believe in the opinion of most of people on this stage, well, I don't know, two-state solution is something that I think is important. And I do think that Vice President Harris leads a little bit more aggressively on that issue than the Biden administration has. I look forward to peace in the Middle East. I believe it's possible. Right now, I really worry that the things that are going on up in the north with Hezbollah and with Lebanon are very, very destructive in terms of that possibility of going towards a peaceful solution. So I am very anxious about that evolution.
Congressman Waltz, I want to press you on something as well as it relates to your own party and this broader foreign policy ideological struggle, if you will. A few months ago, around the time of the NATO summit, I interviewed Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell in his office, who was, one of the things he was touting was the fact that more NATO members are now meeting the 2% threshold. But he also talked about this sort of, what's that?
Finally.
Yeah. He also talked about this, again, the ideological battle in the party on foreign policy between sort of the neoconservatives and those who align more with America First and Donald Trump. One of the things that Senator McConnell told me was that when he hears the phrase America First, it reminds him of the isolationists of the 20s and 30s who wanted to focus only on our own country, wanted to ignore what was happening in Europe, and of course we know what ended up happening in Europe, and the U.S. didn't join the conflict until much later in it. What do you make of comments like that from Mitch McConnell? Albeit, yes, he's not a fan of Donald Trump, and yes, he is sort of a fixture of the Bush era neoconservatives. What do you make of a comment like that?
I think you have. I mean, I think he and others are listening to a lot of loud voices that don't necessarily reflect the facts. I mean, if we actually walk through the facts, what did the Middle East look like under the Trump administration? ISIS, which was ravaging most of Iraq and Syria, attacks across Europe, inspired attacks in the United States, was largely defeated. Baghdadi was dead. Iran was broke. Its currency was tanking. Its oil exports dropped from 4 million barrels a day to less than 400,000. Its Field General Soleimani also taken off the battlefield. And what did we have as a result? We had historic Nobel Peace Prize worthy deals being signed on the White House lawn in the Abraham Accords, not once, twice, but 3 times. If you look at, again, we didn't have an invasion in Eastern Europe on his watch. You had a significant generational pivot to China. But you do have, I think, a very different approach when it comes to our border, securing our sovereignty. And I do think you would see much more of a focus on the Western Hemisphere, where we have all of the energy, food, critical mineral resources that we need if we, I think, invested in a more serious way in Central and South America. We want to talk about the root causes of migration. Let's put incentives in place to attract foreign investment into Central and South America in line with our values, not the Chinese Communist Party's values. So, I just think that defies the facts.
Well, what's interesting is I think we agree on many, many things, and I think, frankly, that I agree in the need for investing more in the Global South. I think that I think we agree on the importance of making sure that we continue to support Ukraine. I think there's a combination of those, and I also think we agree largely on the energy issue. So I think we have a challenge, which is we need to make sure that we as members of Congress behave like grown-ups and figure out how to get along so that we can serve the American people.
But I put that also on my friends in the media. I put that on my friends in the media as well.
Well, on that note, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. To our audience, thank you, Congressman Waltz and Congresswoman Houlihan. This was a great discussion. And again, thank you all for being here.
All right. Thank you. Thanks.
Always.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Dr. Tessie Ojo of the Diana Award.
Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing today? No. More energy. Come on. How's everyone doing today? Amazing. It's a real honor to be here to join you guys this morning. The Diana Award is a living legacy to Diana, Princess of Wales. And usually when I talk about this, I have to try and tell you who we are and maybe tell you who Princess Diana is. But today I don't have to do that, because I'm thrilled to be joined today by her son, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. And joining us will be two inspiring young change makers, Christina and Kiara. Amazing. So we live in a time of rapid change. Young people today face unprecedented challenges, from the pressures of social media to climate anxiety to economic instability that happens across the world, and also the constant drive to succeed. I know that people of my generation, 50 and above, we always assume that we've had it harder than young people. We think their life is easy. But I promise you that these challenges are taking a toll on the mental well-being of our young people. Mental health is no longer simply a side issue. It is actually an issue that shapes how well young people transition into adulthood to reach their full potential. Scientists tell us actually that the biggest epidemic facing young people is their mental health, particularly from the age of 15 and onwards. Today, we're not only here to talk about this issue, we're actually here to listen to young voices. Because unlike what people think, they're not just leaders of tomorrow, they are change makers of today. That's right, you should clap. Through their activism, these young people are already shaping their future. And it's our responsibility to amplify their voices and provide the support that they need. At the Diana Award, we believe, Princess Diana actually believed that young people with the right support can change the world. And that's the core of our mission. And for the last 25 years, we've been empowering young people to advocate for the issues that matter most to them. But this year, our 25th anniversary, we're taking it one step further. We are launching what we're calling the Decade of Youth Wellbeing. Because we are no longer comfortable with just hoping that mental health will go away. We want to see over the next 10 years that every young person, irrespective of where they live in the world, have the power, the resources to tackle mental health crisis for themselves and for their peers. For us, this is not simply a vision for the future. This is a call to action for today. I'm very grateful to have the Duke of Sussex with us. He is a passionate advocate for mental health. He actually said to me as we came in that actually we should no longer talk about mental health, we should talk about mental fitness. His dedication to this cause strengthens our mission. And today we will hear from him and we will hear from the change makers by his side. So I implore you to open your hearts, open your minds, be ready to be inspired by the stories of these incredible young people and the stories that they will tell. But most importantly, we want to work with you together to create a better and a more equitable world for everyone. I'm going to pass the mic to you now, Prince Harry.
Thank you, Tessie. Good morning, everybody. and thank you, Concordia, for having us. It's a very, very important subject that affects every single one of us, and I'm privileged to be here with Diana Award and with yourselves, Christina and Chiara. Very, very nice to see you again. We're here to listen to you. For some reason, I've been given a microphone to ask questions, and I'll do my best to get out of you guys what really. Well, let's start with this. What worries you the most about the world today, from your own perspective, but also your peers? What worries you, but also what are the biggest barriers to young people reaching their full potential?
All right, I'll take the mic first. Thank you. There are two things I'd want to comment on. Firstly, peace and security. Currently, there are 110 ongoing conflicts in the world. And without being political, I'm sure we can all acknowledge that in all of these 110 contexts and beyond, there are young people being affected, whether it's through displacement, just the constant facing of trauma and terror, and even for the young people like myself that work in the space or just looking on, we're just wondering, when will our governments and our countries get it right? When will we secure our present and our future? And all this anxiety about the uncertainty, it worries us and it acts as a barrier to us fulfilling our fullest potential. The second issue I want to comment on is climate anxiety. I'm from Jamaica, a small island developing state, and we just faced a Category 5 hurricane, the first of its kind to be experienced that early in the hurricane calendar. Think on that. And there are other persons in other countries that were affected. And so many young people across the world, developing nations, SIDS, etc., that are constantly being faced with environmental degradation and just feeling that when will my country literally slip away into the ocean? Young people are being affected by this. That constrains us from being able to dream and aspire and to achieve. So those are some of the issues I want to comment on, and I would just hope that you reflect on that as we think about how we can support young people.
Thank you, Christina. As someone who comes from Indonesia, living in Jakarta, climate issues really is a big problem for all of us, especially considering that Jakarta is destined to sink in a couple of years due to climate issues. But what I'd like to discuss today has to do with education and the access to that. My advocacy work is with the children in Bantar Gebang. It's Southeast Asia's biggest landfill site back home. And there are 1,000 children that we help of 7,000 children living on the trash site. And if you can imagine, I've been there personally a couple of times, along with 50 other volunteers. These are children living amidst the trash. Their clothes look like the trash that you would see that they're stepping on, and all of the above is just really painful to see. But what we do at Cases for Care is we try to provide an education to them, albeit an informal type of education. We build libraries there and we provide them with the access to reading those books. And I think this access to education is especially important to young people. They're anxious about being able to provide for their families. And I think that's why we need to be able to amplify access to education and provide young people with that gateway to a brighter future.
Thank you. Yeah. How have you both seen the impacts and the results of bad mental health, which has been created by this world that we've allowed to be created for you guys, but the negative impacts of mental health? How has that affected you personally, your peers, and how have you seen it affect broader society at the same time?
Scared children cannot dream, Prince Harry. Scared children, anxious young people cannot dream. We cannot aspire, we cannot achieve. And if you cannot dream, you cannot create. There's no creativity, and then that means no productivity. So my CEOs are sitting here, you're thinking about the top dollar, you're thinking about driving economies for the governments that are here. none of what you're doing that you're working on can mean anything later, can matter if we don't have a competent and capable generation for you to pass your torch on to. So I would even say that you don't need to be selfless to support young people. Even by being selfish and considering your own, I would say, your own concerns with your company or with your government, by supporting young people, alleviating the causes that drive mental health or mental issues among young people, you're actually fulfilling your own goals and the goals of the world.
CEOs aside, I'd like to talk to the politicians directly. I believe you also have the power, and you can aspire to amplify our voices, to provide us with, access to this education. And I think the Indonesian government has done a wonderful job, and I'd like to give them credit for that. But there's so much more that we can do, and once we realize that there are these problems that still exist, identify those and find solutions to those, that is how we can make the world a better place.
If I may just jump in, one of the things I know about the young people we work with, you guys, is despite this crisis, you guys are so resilient. You find strength from somewhere. Where do you find your strength from?
I believe I pull my strength from the possibility of better. Because if I sit and wait for change, and I don't try to agitate for change, they said that we have to try to be the change that we want to see in the world. I have to be an active agent. And when I look around and I see the young people like Kiara from Indonesia and the other Legacy Award recipients and Diana Award recipients, and I see young people across the world and maybe in this very room and watching online, as a collective, we're so fired up for change, and we continue to demand change because our lives and our livelihoods are at risk. It's literally survival for us. It's not just a fancy thing to put on my resume to apply to a great school. It's about, if I don't fight for a better world, there will be no world for me and for my peers, and that's what drives me.
You're basically saying it's a life or death situation.
Indeed.
Wow. Kiara.
What drives me is that if we don't amplify their voices, nobody else will speak for them. There are people here that have no voices. There are people here living in this world, perhaps in this room, that have been silenced by certain entities in the world who have more power than them. We need to encourage these entities to live a life that's more than themselves, to live a life beyond their own short-termist goals, and look into the future where people like us, our futures are not certain, with climate issues, with things like politics, with war, with all these issues, we are almost struggling in the status quo, and in the future there's no guarantee that we'll have the same amount of comfort that we have right now. And so again, speaking to what Christina said, it is sort of a survival, but also to ensure other people can survive in the future as well.
Look, both of you are on the stage here. You are recipients of the Diana Award as of March last year. Again, congratulations. How has being part of the Diana Award helped you in your own missions and helped you be listened to? Because I hope that it feels good to you guys that you have a room full here of people who are genuinely listening. You have cameras at the back. You have live stream, and people want to hear you. Do you feel as though you're being heard? Do your peers feel as though the leaders of today, both in politics and all of the decision makers, people in positions of power, do you believe that they're listening? And if they're not, how can they?
Let me start off by speaking to the Diana Award. It has definitely amplified my voice back home in Jamaica and in the Caribbean region. There are many platforms and entities that do believe in young people, but they believe that we are the future and primarily for the future. Wait your turn. But at the Diana Award, you believe also in the now, that if given the support, we can work now to ensure that we're helping to change the world. So through the Diana Award, my messaging is being amplified, and I'm able to, through mentorship, through funding and support, through opportunities, unique, may I state and stress, unique opportunities like sitting on this platform right now, I'm able to reach more persons and have my voice out there, get connections to help with the work that I do in Jamaica. In terms of if I'm being heard, I don't just want to be heard. So I won't use it as my marker, to be honest, Prince Harry. Am I being acted on? Things that I'm saying, is it being acted on? That is still a question mark. And so I'd hope that there are persons here listening to me and Kiara who feel inspired to not just listen and say, yes, those young people sounded really eloquent this morning, but they will act. We have to act now. Thank you.
Just before you go, Kiara, just do what Christine says. That's it. Act now. That's it.
Yes, so the Diana Award has been instrumental in not only our projects and our advocacy, but the 20 other Legacy Award recipients and beyond around the world, the recipients, but also as a source of inspiration to the people that have not technically earned the award, but they see this project and this group and this organization as an inspiration to be able to create, to start to create that change. And what Christina said, I think I have to agree that you can listen to us, but we would really like you to act on what we say. Personally, with my project in Bantargabang, it is sort of a taboo political topic because these children are undocumented, and so they don't have access to the public school education, they don't have access to the services, to the free government, the free government access to clothing, to food, etc. And I think if we look beyond our day-to-day lives, listen to what they have to say and act on what they need, that is how we can really make a change. And to listen to us is not enough, to act on us would be even better.
Well said, Kiara. I think, again, it's not, and look, again, the two of you up here representing your entire generation at this point. But every single one of you has a passion project that you are focused on. But one of the reasons why I think that we are here today is because of mental health, right? And the fact that it affects every single one of us from top to bottom, from the youngest to the oldest. And I think you guys are, you're leading the charge in hopefully being able to break down the stigma, to be able to continue these conversations. But when you talk to this room and to the audience and say, act on what we're saying, it's not just from you guys, it's for the whole entire generation. Because so many people are looking for solutions, and the fact of the matter is, there are solutions to all of these issues. And I applaud you, for certainly at your age, to be on this stage, to have the confidence that you do, and to be able to speak as clearly and as passionately as you do. And I know that my mum would be incredibly proud of you guys, not just you, but all of the award winners. And Tessie, you've been in this for a very long time, so thank you for that as well. But the way that you do it, your activism, your compassion, those two things are so true to how my mum led her life and what she believed in. And the way that you do it is incredible. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think that really leads me to one of my thoughts. I think when we think about mental health, the reason we wanted to center the voices of young people is because you will see from these young people how innovative they are, how you bring new energy, fresh ideas. Mental health has been something that we've battled with as a world for years and years, and yet it feels like we keep going round in circle. From our perspective at the Diana Award, we want young people to be at the center of tackling this issue. We want you guys to take, because you have those fresh ideas. I love the way I've seen this, like you rightly said, I've been at the Diana for so long. I've seen so many young people bring fresh ideas, innovative ideas to tackling age-old problems that we think can never change. And suddenly a young person walks into the room and they go, oh, that's so simple, we can do this. That's why we need your voices. What do you guys think?
Well, of course, I must agree. Yes, we do have the power to change the world, and we're already doing that through the projects that we plan and we implement, the partnerships, co-creation with, I would like to say intergenerational co-creation, which is very important as well. I believe that young people should lead, but I also believe that we can learn as well in how we champion our causes. But I would also add that a big part of young people leading is getting the support, which is why what Diana Award is doing is so incredible, because you provide a platform of support for us through the mentorship and the connections that you facilitate. I would also say for persons here that may be interested in supporting young people as well, to consider action in that through financing and providing mentorship as well. Because a lot of times we tout this statement, we believe in young people, and I always like to say, you should put your money where your belief is. So it would be really good to see a bit more actionable support coming forward.
I'm just going to take a lot of quotes from Christina. Put your money where your belief is. That's wonderful. I love that. Can we just write that down? And yeah, amazing. Thank you, Christina. Kiara.
Childlike innocence, some people call that naivety. It's an important skill to have. No matter where you work, no matter how old you are, I think it's important for us to always believe that we can change things, even if it doesn't work or succeed the first time around. But if it wasn't for these large organizations or prominent figures like Prince Harry and Tessie and the Diana Award, we wouldn't be able to do what we do or anything else. When it comes to advocacy, when it comes to trying to change the status quo, because it doesn't just take one hand, it takes multiple. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Rosina, the government's recognized you, right? The Jamaican government? Yes? No?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. So the reason I bring that up is because amongst how many thousands of, I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Almost 100,000 now. We've been on for 25 years.
25 years. So we have an army of activists of almost about 100,000. And the reason I bring that up is because they are scattered all across the world in so many different countries. And again, the reason why I bring that up is because surely one of the solutions here is for governments to implement or at least offer or find people, young people like yourselves, and bring them into decision-making, policy-making situations, right? Before the problems exist, and we're very, very good at creating problems for ourselves to try and solve. But surely by bringing young people in at the early stages for those solutions, surely that is where the difference is going to be made. And why is that not happening? Some places it is, but why is it not happening?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier, that a lot of times we consider that young people are for the future, so they should wait. It's important that we involve young people now, because as I like to say, nothing for us without us. You cannot create any kind of policy or program that will affect young people now or in the future without it being informed by young people. And that inform that I speak of, it should not be a tokenistic kind of inform. You consult and then you just put something on paper. There's no validation or involvement beyond that point. Young people should be involved in the co-creation of these initiatives, but they should also be involved in the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. And I think that's where we go wrong many of the times. So the entire policy process, young people should be involved.
I think that deserves a...
I think it's easy to overlook young people. Especially, I'm 18 and Christina's 27, and still, Christina faces people not listening to her and people not acting on her words, and it's even worse on my side. I think we need to overlook that youth. They look a certain way, they don't look too professional, and they're not so eloquent, but their mission and their goals are still as valid as anyone else.
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to throw a question to every one of you. Prince Harry, I'm going to start with you. And I wanted to ask you one question. We want to end on hope. We have to believe that the future, that we can, not the future, right now, that we can change things. So I'm going to ask each one of you what gives you, what are you hopeful for? When you think about the future, what are you hopeful for?
Can I go last?
Okay. Okay, is that okay? Okay. Should we start with you, Kiara?
I want to hear from you guys first.
I'm glad you brought this up, Tessie. We really need hope in this world. What gives me hope? I think it's when people, whether you're young, whether you're old, no matter who you are, you have even an ounce of willingness to change the status quo, because that's where real change starts.
All right. I think what gives me hope is that despite the anxiety around our future, whether it's around peace and security, the climate, social inequality, young people continue to rise against adversity. We continue to agitate for change. We continue to demand more from our governments. And we continue to demand more from ourselves as well by going out there and doing our work and leading our own projects. And just to see that global movement across the world in all spaces, all nooks and crannies, of the young people's voice just chanting for more and acting for more, that inspires me and that gives me hope.
The reason why I wanted to go last is because these guys are the ones that give me hope. I've said it years ago, and I'll say it again. The younger generation are not putting too much pressure on you guys. You are what give me hope. The courage that you have gives me hope, because every single one of us need courage in order to really move the dial and create positive change in today's world, probably more so now than ever. So thank you to you guys for giving me and probably a lot of other people in this room hope. And now we need to listen, constantly listen, and then act on the advice and the vision that you have, because otherwise it's your future that's being stolen from you, and that is unacceptable.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, we also asked a few young people back home what gave them hope, and there's a short video about that.
Connection with others.
I find hope when my music inspires others.
For me, hope is all about finding meaningful relationships and purpose in life.
Remembering where I came from.
My heart beats with purpose, and that purpose gives me hope.
Taking time to be grateful for what I have.
I find hope in knowing that challenges lead to growth.
I find hope in traveling. Exploring new places reminds me that the world is beautiful. It gives me perspective, and that it's worth living in it.
To find hope, I turn to my family for support. The fact that even smaller steps are progress.
I find hope by pausing in anything I'm doing, to take a few minutes to breathe and reassert myself that there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. That this difficult period will not only make me stronger, more resilient, but an even better version of myself.
I suppose I want to say what gives me hope. What gives me hope is that we have just shared with you our vision for the next 10 years. Our initiative called A Decade of Wellness, a decade of youth well-being, that every young person, irrespective of where they live on earth, would have the resources, the support they need to thrive. That every young person will be unafraid to dream because of the fear that they might not even be here. But we couldn't possibly do that without people like you making that work. So what gives me hope is that you all will take this vision and run with it, that we will turn the words that we've spoken today into action. Thank you. And please join me in thanking this amazing panel, Prince Harry, Christina, and Kiara.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Concordia's Anna Freeman.